Hello, welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina. On Sundays, I do a thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. You just said you wanted to stay in. Freya's laying down. Could you lay down? Could you be a good balder and lay down? Don't jump on me. No. 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 Good boy. Since it is October, it is time to look at all things that go bump in the night, making this week's book, The Apparitionist. Got a lot of glare off of that one. The Apparitionists, A Tale of Phantoms, Frauds, Photography, and the Man Who Captured Lincoln's Ghost by Peter Manseau. Now, normally I do mix up a cocktail, but for 4 years now I've been mixing up cocktails. This year, my husband and I challenged each other to do Sober October. We are 4 days and like 12 hours in, and it's rough. It's a little rough, but we're going to stick with it. We're doing good. But I needed something to do with my hands, so I'm not touching my face all the time. So instead of a cocktail, I'm mixing up a mocktail. And this one is called an Apparition. It's going to be 2 ounces of Blackberry Syrup, 1 ounce of fresh lemon juice, 1 ounce of orange juice, and 4 ounces of ginger ale. Not as snazzy as a, booze-filled one would be, but this should do the trick. Well, this should be interesting. I'm going to do the trick of anything. Let's do this. The Apparitionists takes us back to the spiritualist movement of the 19th century, which we first learned about back in 2021 when I read Talking to the Dead about the Fox sisters, Kate and Maggie Fox, Rise of Spiritualism by Barbara Weisberg. Then we revisited in 2023 with Calling the Spirits, A History of Seances by Lisa Morton. Hope I got a big enough glass. Said a tall glass, but as one might expect in a house full of alcoholics, I only have pint glasses, so that's what we got. Manseau focuses his story on William Mumler, William Mumler became well known as a spirit photographer, and yes, that is every bit as crazy as you might think it sounds. He's known historically for 2 things. First off, capturing Lincoln's ghost. Like, no joke, Mary Todd Lincoln came in to see him in 1872, and he got a picture of Mary Todd with Lincoln standing right behind her. I will throw it up here. Oh, no. Well, I just don't think there's enough juice in 1 lemon for an ounce. Yeah, okay. I'm not beating myself up over this. I brought backup. So he caught a picture of Lincoln's ghost. Oh, my God. My hands are all sticky from the lemon. Oh, my God. So Lincoln's ghost. Oh, I'm losing track. I'm losing the plot here. So the president was 7 years in his grave. His ghost, not just the guy, not just Lincoln standing behind her. But reason number 2 is the most perplexing reason of all, which is that nobody knows how he did it. I'm getting ahead of myself here. The story goes way back. It'll definitely be 1 ounce in the orange. Oh, this is so messy. It's laundry day. I'm going to use my pants. So the book does take us through a bit of the history of photography in America from his most famous practitioners, i.e. Samuel Morse, who is more famously known for inventing the telegraph and Morse code, but as well as known photographers in his day. He was a well-known photographer in his day. He covers Matthew Brady, who ran the preeminent shop in New York, stationed on Broadway directly across from P.T. Barnum's American Museum, who took one of Lincoln's most other famous photographs from his campaign trail. Like literally right before he was elected, anybody who was anybody back in the day went to Brady's photography studio. So all the really famous people, congressmen, senators, politicians, the Vanderbilts, they all would have gone to Brady for their photos. But they all got pictures taken. If you were anybody, you got your picture taken at Brady's studio in New York, and then probably went to see the American Museum. Yeah, I did bring a big enough glass. I'm just going to stir this up. No, I'm not. I think it looks better not stirred. I'm going to leave it be. Brady also took Mary Todd Lincoln's photograph shortly after the president was inaugurated. He was part of that big shopping trip she did in New York shortly after the inauguration. Manseau covers in brief the career of Alexander Gardner, who is the most well-known battlefield photographer. I mean, even today you can buy his book of Civil War photographs, initially published in 1866 as a reprint off Amazon for $14. I mean, it's still going because his pictures are that famous. He actually got his start under Brady and came to resent the fact that, well, he's the one taking the picture, Brady's the one getting the credit for it, because when you work for a company, the work product belongs to the company, not to you. And that was true back then, it's true now. It's one of the reasons for starting your own company, for example. But mostly, the brief biographical sketches of the others was a backdrop for Mumler's story. Fuzzy on top. That's tart. It's drinkable, but it's very tart. William Mumler was born in 1832. We don't actually know the exact date. His initial training was as a jewelry engraver, and that was what he was doing. That was what he was trained in, and traded in. But he had an infatuation with Mrs. Hannah Green Stewart, who operated a photo studio and gallery between Mumler's former place of business and his new place of business. So he'd end up walking by her shop every day and was infatuated with her. And it was this infatuation that brought this amateur photographer into the spotlight of the day. Mrs. Stewart, who would eventually divorce her husband and marry Mumler, was quite adept at supporting herself. And no, I do not mean in the world's oldest profession. This was Boston, not Tombstone. She would support herself by braiding hair, specifically hair that was cut off a deceased family member as a keepsake, which was a very common Victorian custom. That, you know, they'd cut off a lock of hair, braid it, put it into jewelry, put it into a locket, or, you know, twist it into a bracelet, something that would allow them to keep a piece of the dearly departed near and dear to their heart, basically. She was an adept herbalist, sold herself as a healer and as a medium, promising to get those for whom she was braiding the hair in touch with the original owners of the hair in question. And of course, she ran a photography studio and gallery. And almost without meaning to, Mumler learned photography by watching Mrs. Stewart until one day he decided to take a self-portrait inside her studio. And the image he developed shows Mumler standing and what was very clearly a not person sitting in the chair beside him. This is the picture he took. As you can see, the gal sitting in the chair is kind of see-through. So she was very clearly not actually there. And he didn't know how he did it. Now, he didn't believe he'd captured a spirit image. Mrs. Stewart believed right away. H.F. Gardner, who had brought the Fox sisters to Boston, he believed. Mumler just thought it was a novelty. He transferred the image from the glass to paper to sell as a novelty, basically. I mean, he was like, this is kind of cool. I don't know how I did it, but here you go. However, he slowly came to believe. And Manseau kind of hints that it was his infatuation with Mrs. Green or Mrs. Stewart that made him believe, and I kind of agree with it. You know, her own charismatic mesmerism had him eventually converted to full spiritualism, where he definitely believed that he was capturing pictures of ghosts. Eventually, he came to say that the girl in the chair was his deceased cousin. Now, whether or not she is or was, we're never going to know. I don't know that we have pictures of Mumler's cousin from when she was alive to compare it to the ghost sitting in the chair, but he said it was. Nobody could gainsay him, so there you go. And a phenomenon was born. At exactly the right time, too. I mean, spiritualism had been knocking on death's door as a movement, pun very much intended on that one, until the Civil War happened. So you have November 6, 1860, Lincoln won the presidency. That same day, South Carolina seceded. He was sworn in on March 4th, 1861, and a little over a month later, on April 12th, the war officially began with the battle at Fort Sumter, right? And we fired on the South fired on Sumter, and the North lost that one. Did they lose that one? I don't know. I don't remember. I'm sure it was covered in, you know, Battle Cry of Freedom. And while no one knew it yet, I mean, both sides thought the war would be over by like June, spiritualism was saved. Because once the dust had settled, everyone wanted to find a way to say goodbye to those they had lost in the fighting. And so you have 600,000 new dead, 600,000 families in mourning, and they all wanted to talk to those they'd lost. And Mumler, his talent was in hot demand. People were all too happy to pay for a picture of themselves with one who had crossed over. He was good at it. Now, not everyone believed. There were definitely naysayers, including one very much alive woman who said the spirit appearing in more than one picture was her. But enough believed that skeptics of the day became alarmed and started sending investigators to try and figure out how he did it. And here's the thing, though. I gotta close my curtain. I'm overlit today. Oh yeah, there we go. I was looking like a ghost. I had too much light in here. Now I know why. The sun was rising too fast for me. No one could figure out how he did it. They sat in, they watched through every step of the process, from the time they sat to the time the photo was developed, all right? And they never saw anything he did that could have produced the results he was getting. At least one investigator became an ally of Mumler's and would later testify on his behalf during his fraud trial, because that is the ultimate denouement of this book, is that fraud trial. Now, after the war, Mr. and Mrs. Mumler, Hannah, again, divorced Stewart, married Mumler, headed to New York and set up shop there, also on Broadway, which was not unusual. I mean, you know, ideally, today they would tell you, you don't want to put two stores that are selling the same thing right next to each other, you know. I mean, spite businesses are funny on television, but in reality, they're not very practical. because they can just go to the competitor if you piss them off. But Mumler had a specialty, right? Brady had his famous studio, but Mumler famously took pictures of spirits. It was a big deal right after the war. And it was in New York that news correspondent P.V. Hickey, who believed Mumler was a fraud, would file a complaint with the mayor's office. Hickey was a journalist for, I think it was the World News. But ultimately, his complaint came from his profound faith. I believe he was Catholic, and he thought that this was quite blasphemous. The mayor at the time was A. Oakey Hall. He had appointed a team to run down crime, of which fraud most certainly is one, and the complaint was taken by Joseph Tooker. Well, Tooker went to Mumler's studio and had a portrait taken. Tooker asked Mumler if a spirit would be present, and Mumler said he didn't know, they didn't always appear, and made no promises. But when Tooker came to pick up his results, there were spirits. And Mumler was immediately clapped into handcuffs and taken away on fraud charges to the Tombs, which I think is still where arrestees are taken in New York. I mean, some things just never change. And then a most unusual trial took place. It was a bench trial, not a jury trial. I mean, the judge Dowling, Joseph Dowling? It was Joseph Dowling, was the only one whose opinion mattered in this case. Mumler did hire himself a very good attorney who used, of all things, extensive Bible quotes to prove the existence of spirits. And the prosecutor's whole case basically boiled down to he's a fraud, and here's how he could have done it. And no question, author Peter Manseau outlined 7 techniques which had been used by other photographers of the day to produce similar ghostly results in photography. First off, the photographer could take an image on one plate, then hide it in his camera. This would produce a ghostly image over the next photo taken. Now, we know Mumler didn't do that because, again, several professionals had sat in. They would have noticed the extra plate on the camera lens and been like, wait a minute, that's how he's doing it. He might have an accomplice hide behind a curtain and then come out and pose behind the sitter before reconcealing themselves behind the camera or behind the curtain. Not impossible, but surely somebody would have noticed. I mean, he was very well known. He took a lot of pictures. Somebody somewhere would have said, what's behind that curtain? And the jig would have been up, right? He might insert a miniature image of a spirit inside the camera behind the lens. Then when the light passes through the aperture, the miniature would distort it, causing this faint ghostly image. Now, personally, I think that's the one, and I'll come back to why in a little bit. Now, after the picture is taken, the photographer could place a spirit image behind the glass and re-expose it to light. Again, multiple photographers sat in, watched the process from beginning to end, never saw him do this. He might impose a blurred image on the slide while the glass plate is in its silver nitrate bath, using a secret light to transfer the image. Again, nobody reported seeing any such. He might print the spirit image onto paper and then use that paper to print a new image of the sitter on top of it. But again, start to finish, people watched the process and never saw any such thing. The most likely that people could tell was that a glass plate used to take an image of one person just might not be cleaned off properly before reusing it on the next image. Maybe, but again, nobody reported seeing this, and the thought went. See, not having alcohol doesn't help with the random ramblings of the train of thought going off the rails. Oh. Yeah. It's gone. If it comes back, I'll circle back, but it's gone. I don't remember what I was going to say. Maybe that was possible, but I feel like not. Again, photographers watched the whole thing. They probably would have noticed if the glass wasn't clean. Now, the defense team patiently sat through that whole thing. You know, the expert witnesses for the prosecution sitting there and going through all of this, calmly pointed out that they never argued that spirit photographs could not be produced by such methods, only that, as testified by multiple expert photographers, the prosecution had not proven that Mumler had used any of them. So that's a fair point. Defense did his job quite well there. No one could prove it. At no point could anybody who had watched him see when he had engaged in any such activity. My own thoughts on the overall thing is, nothing is impossible. Maybe he did find a way to pierce the veil and take unique photos. However, realistically, if any spirits were around to be captured, I would think Alexander Gardner would have been far more likely to capture the restless dead still hovering over their own corpses. But Gardner never caught a one. He caught some truly stunning images. Several of them are included in the book here. but he never caught a picture of a spirit. And I feel like he probably would have caught at least one if they were truly hovering around. Because why would they die and they go, I'm off to Mumler's, I'm going to have my picture taken? I'm pretty sure they have, God, very bright. It does not make sense that they would just die and then go, I'm going to go wait in Boston for somebody to have their picture taken with me. I feel like the dead have more important things to think about, if you will. The one detail, and this is why I think it was option number 3, that sticks out again and again from each expert witness, is that Mumler would at some point put his hand on the camera. Now, this wasn't necessarily wrong. Nobody said, why are you doing that? But it would be unusual, because this is in the days when you had to be very still to have your picture taken. All right? And for sometimes an extended period of time, when it first started, the exposure took like 20 minutes, which is why it was very hard to get a picture of a living person, because, you know, no matter how hard you try to be still, you're going to blink. You got to breathe. Yes, you can take shallow breaths. You can stare for as long as you possibly can without blinking, but eventually you're going to blink because you're alive. Your eyes need the lubrication. The first known, like, and he covers this in the book, the first known photograph of people is this image taken in 1838 by Charles Daguerre, the guy who basically invented the whole process. These are why the original pictures were called daguerreotypes. It was taken on a very busy street during a very busy time of day. Yet the only 2 people in the image are the shoe shine and his customer, right? These guys right here. I'm going to put a circle around it. They are the only ones who are stationary long enough to imprint on the photograph. And even then, they're still slightly blurry because there was still movement. The shoe shine in the shoe. The guy was probably standing there talking to him. But that's why. The street itself was very busy. You know, horses and buggies going by, people walking, none of them stuck because they weren't standing still. Now, all of that is to say that putting his hand on the camera risks bumping the camera, which would then clear the shot, requiring a complete reset. So why do it? Why would you risk knocking the camera and having to start the whole process over? Because you can't charge the customer for your fuck up in that case, right? Well, again, this is why I think 3 is most likely. I think Mumler was very adept at sleight of hand, and he was never caught in the act. So I think he had those little miniatures, and when he put his hand on the camera, he would slide it in. And now he undoubtedly had a deft touch. He had to have. He worked as a miniature engraver, right? You have to be very careful with your hands because you don't want to stab yourself and you don't want to fuck up what you're engraving. So, and he'd have been used to working with small objects. You know, miniature engraving, you could engrave those little cameos, right? And then the human willingness to believe and desire contact with loved ones lost provided the remaining details. I mean, the blurred image is now your lost child, husband, mother, sister. Whoever it is you're missing, that blurry image becomes that person because you want to believe, you want to see it. And maybe it was. Maybe I'm being cynical here. I mean, I certainly believe in ghosts and things that go bump in the night. I'm just not sure that you can get pictures of them. Now, ultimately, we're never going to know the truth, right? If you believe, then they were spirits. If you don't, he was a huckster who got away with it because Judge Joseph Dowling, after hearing closing arguments, rendered a verdict in less than a minute. Quote, after careful attention to the case, I have come to the conclusion that the prisoner should be discharged. End quote. Now, this does not mean that Dowling was a spiritualist or that he believed Mumler to be innocent, only that the prosecution failed to prove he was guilty of fraud. Fair enough. You got to do your job, you got to do it well, and you have to go where the evidence leads you, and if the prosecution failed to prove its case, you got to let the guy go. This book was interesting. It was a little disjointed. I found the information of Alexander Gardner interesting, but did not seem to add anything to the overarching story of Mumler and his trial, other than my reaching my own conclusion, which was not stated in the book, my own conclusion that wouldn't the dead have just shown up over their bodies at the battlefield. But, I mean, it was interesting. It was a very fast read. It did not take me long to go through this one. So if you are interested in spiritualism or history of photography, it is a brief history. This is not a detailed breakdown of Daguerre or Brady or Gardner for that matter. But it was interesting. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.